All right, my name's Leota Harriman. I'm the editor of the independent newspaper in Edgewood, and this is a candidates forum for the legislative races in the East Mountains and the Estancia Valley. So we're gonna jump right into this because we wanna keep this short and sweet for anybody who wants to tune in. So I'd like to introduce Merritt Hamilton Allen. She'll be helping me put questions to the candidates. Merritt, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I'm really honored to be part of this. And one thing I'd like to say, as everyone on this Zoom call knows, I know how hard it is to run for office. And I also know in the legislature, you're raising tons of money for a zero-pay job. And then in 2020, you're not even going door to door or doing the contact. So I want to give kudos to all of you and thank you for your interest in public service, because I think that's tremendously important and very hard. Just a quick thing, I want to go in alphabetical order by last name, and we're just going to rotate it so everybody gets to go first and last, because that seems the fairest thing to me. I'm so pleased we're joined by Becky King-Spindle, State Representative Matthew McQueen, and Senator James White. Thank you all, and we agreed earlier that we'll go by first names. So just in alphabetical order, I'd like to ask a quick opening statement in order from Becky, Matthew, and Jim.
Okay, so obviously I was having internet trouble, so you can't see me, but I do still have a landline. My name is Rebecca King-Spindle, and I'm running for State Representative for House District 50. The reason I decided to run was I'm on the Moriarty Edgewood School Board currently, and I'm so tired of hearing how our youth and our future are ranked 50th in education, 50th in child welfare, just last in everything. My grandmother, Alice King, she was the first lady, and she started the first Children, Youth, and Families Department cabinet level in the nation. And I just really felt a calling that we need more children advocates in Santa Fe. A third of our state budget is education, and we just really need somebody to stand up for our educators and our children.
Delightful. Okay. Matthew. Yes, we can. Or are you still, were you finished?
Yes, that's why I'm running. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Hey, fantastic. Over to you, Matthew.
My name is Matthew McQueen, and I am the state representative for House District 50. District 50, it's a big district. So if you're in the Edgewood area, the East Mountain area, it goes north, it goes south. It doesn't go east-west very far, but it is 100 miles long. It's got parts of 4 counties in it. It is a geographically challenging district, and it is also very diverse. I'm in my 6th year in the legislature, and I'm running for re-election because I feel like there's work to be done. You know, in New Mexico, as Becky mentioned, we're bringing up the rear in a lot of the indicators where we don't want to be last. We're leading in some of the indicators where we don't want to be first. So there's definitely work to be done. In my 6 years, I've seen a lot of changes. You know, I spent 4 years with Governor Martinez. I've been with Governor Lujan Grisham for 2 years. And, you know, it's been a remarkable change the past 2 years. But unfortunately, we're facing an unprecedented situation with the pandemic and with the budget impact. We're going back into special session on June 18th, and it's going to be tough. And I think our goal as legislators is going to be to, you know, continue in a balanced budget, which we are legally required to have, but also protect the investments that we've made in New Mexico, protect the investments that we've made in the kids of New Mexico. Education is always a priority. And now it's absolutely crucial that we diversify our economy. We get so much money from oil and gas, at least we did. We have to develop other segments. Otherwise, we're just gonna keep going on this boom and bust cycle. And so I think there's work to be done. I think experience counts, and I'm ready to go back to the Roundhouse and get the work done. That's why I'm running. I'd appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Jim White.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Leota, for putting this together, and Merritt for participating as you do. I appreciate that. I'm Senator Jim White, the incumbent senator right now of District 19. 19 runs from Klein's Corners on I-40 all the way back into Albuquerque, Eubank Boulevard in Albuquerque, then up and down the East Mountains, you know, from Chiloli up to almost Madrid. So that's the size of the district. It's relatively large. Constituent-wise, about 50% of the constituents live in the rural area, East Mountain area, and 50% live in the Albuquerque area. So it's a diverse community with kind of different issues going on. But let me tell you why why I'm in this position of where I'm at. Who is that calling? Yeah.
I'm sorry, that was carry on.
You know, I enjoy reading history, and mostly about the history of actual accomplishments. Sometimes those stories are more interesting than fiction is. And I've read a lot about the background of John Adams, the American Revolution, George Washington's battles, his philosophies, where he came from, what he stands for. And I reflect back on one statement, a thing I've read in several books. Ben Franklin walks out of the Constitutional Convention in 1878 or 1787, and he's addressed on the street by an individual who says, "Mr. Benjamin, what kind of government are we going to have?" They were very fearful of having a monarchy, which they just escaped from. Certainly weren't familiar with dictatorships, but didn't want that. It was going to be totally popular vote on every issue. Now, he says, what we're going to do is we're going to have a republic. If you can maintain it, if you can take care of it. A republic being where you elect leaders and people that want to stand up and defend the Constitution and defend the rights that we have. So it takes that kind of a person, that kind of a desire of the country to say, yeah, we want those type of people. We want some leaders up there that will commit themselves to spend the time, will study the issues, and defend the constitutional rights that we have been given. I feel that kind of a sense. We've got a lot of blessings in America. Do we have a perfect government? Maybe not, but it's certainly better than every other government, as far as I'm concerned, in the world. So somebody has to stand up and do these things. When I was asked to take several roles, I said, yeah, I will do that. I'm willing to feel that responsibility. I do feel that responsibility, stand up and work for my community and work for my constituents if elected. And I ended up in that. I never aspired to be in politics. I'm a military background guy. I enjoy flying airplanes, and I think I did it pretty well. But I ended up being in politics because I felt a sense of responsibility to communities and to the government to make this thing work, this great country we have, to make it successful. So that's where I'm at right now. The sense of responsibility. I think everybody should have that they want the country to work. They want it to be successful. And it has been in the past in our history of the country. But we need to stand up for those basic principles on which the government was formed. So yeah, I enjoy doing what I do. I think I do it well for my constituents, and I want to continue to do that. I think I do well in my job, and I consider it to be my job. So I want to get reelected. I want to go back to Santa Fe. Like Matt says, there's work to be done, and we want to continue making progress. Certainly these are tough times, but it needs to be worked. I think I'm in a position to do that. So thank you for the opportunity, Leota and Merritt. Yeah.
Thank you.
Leota, do you want to start off with a question? I have one ready.
Go ahead, knock yourself out.
Okay. And as I said, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So Becky King-Spindle, you will go first, but this question is for all of you. New Mexico, and I feel this very personally, New Mexico has been in a public education abyss for 50 years. In the 60s and 70s, it was the #1 issue. In the 80s and 90s and aughts, it was the #1 issue. We're barely struggling to get a 75% graduation rate, which is fairly abysmal. And we have budget constraints and a virus keeping kids from getting to school. So Becky, what has to be done with PED right now?
I think that the current PED is better than the last one. They're more receptive. They listen to, what the superintendents and educators are telling them and try to work with them. In the past, under Governor Martinez, it was very almost a hostile environment when they had to sweep our budgets, and they were telling us we just had to keep cutting. We had nothing. Our district had nothing left to cut. And we were going through line by line saying, how much toilet paper do we have? Do we need to, can we mark that out because we have enough to last through the year? We were struggling to find enough money to pay our teachers, and we actually came up with not paying our electric bill so that we could pay our teachers. I hate for that to happen again. I think education, we're just now making gains and getting salaries up to where we can actually hire qualified teachers. Nobody wanted to be a teacher because they could make more working at McDonald's. And I just think that we need to keep
Becky, that's
Becky,
that's time.
Okay.
But I also want to follow up on that, and I want to give you 30 more seconds because you didn't answer the question, which is what needs to be done with PED?
I think that they need to focus on helping the educators and the superintendents provide quality education to our students. That needs to be their main. By providing them with, I don't know. I don't know what needs to be done with PED. I'm sorry. I'll have to research that more.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay, Matthew, how does PED go forward in COVID and budget cuts?
So I'm going to agree with Becky. Our PED has come a long way since the Martinez years. There was a hostile relationship between PED and the teachers, and that we were testing our kids too much. The teacher evaluations were unfair, and the teacher pay was low. So you could move to Colorado or you can move to Texas or Arizona and get more pay. And we've worked on all those issues. We have new leadership at PED. When the governor took office, her very first act, her first executive order was to pull back on the PARCC testing that our students were being exposed to. So I think we're headed in the right direction. I know that money doesn't solve everything. Money helps. And so we're trying to keep the funding up, we're trying to keep the pay up, we're trying to keep the benefits up. And then we need to look at other things like early childhood education. But when our kids get to school, they're ready to learn.
Thank you.
All right, Jim, how do we go forward in fall semester 2020?
Yeah, good question. The schools are always an issue. As mentioned, we put a lot of our budget into the schools. Arguably, it's a third to maybe 45% in K through 12, and maybe another 16% in higher education. So we put a lot of money into it, and we have that, and we've increased that. The first thing we need to do is get rid of the Ozzie Martinez lawsuit that's been on the books for 2 years now. The administration needs to appeal that. When the judgment was issued, everybody sat back. I know it was a new administration, but they need to get on the bandwagon right now and challenge that lawsuit, or it's going to continue. We have lawsuits that are out there that have been going on for 10 or 15 years. It's very expensive for the state, We need to challenge that, get it resolved. The problem with the decision was they're looking at old data. Since the governor came in, yeah, we spent a lot more money on education. So we've made progress there. And I think that new data needs to be looked at. We put a lot more money in early childhood education at-risk students. We've made progress with at-risk students, English language learners. We've made progress there. That needs to be recognized. And I think it's time to challenge the lawsuit, get rid of it. There's a couple other things. Parent involvement is a big role. I think kids somebody needs to tell them how important education is. And whether it's a parent, grandparent, school counselor, somehow that needs to be imparted upon a student. And that comes from the parents. I think we work on parent involvement. We try to involve that, but it needs to continue. One of the other things I think we've done, and what I really like, is extending the school year. The K3 plus program adds 3 years, it adds more time to the first 3 years of education, puts more days into the school year. I think that's very productive, and we need to continue that. We've tried to extend that. We talked about extending it to 12th grade. That's probably not going to happen given financial problems right now. We can do through 5th grade. Maybe we can make that happen. But those are good programs, extending the school year, particularly for
that's time.
Schools are in risk. The problem is, we don't have the money right now to do. Those are expensive programs. So we'll see where that plays out. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Right.
So maybe that's a good segue toward talking about the budget. You said you had a budget. Question, Merritt?
I certainly do, but actually, I'd like to talk a little bit about business first, if I can. We know we're dependent on the federal government, oil and gas, and mining in New Mexico. And right now, 2 of those legs on our economic stool have kind of dropped out. Chino Mines laid everyone off. Outside of COVID, we're having this Saudi-Russian production war against American, and particularly the Permian Basin. So what is the right thing for the economy? And what can I'm going to make this better. What can the legislature do to improve the economy in this special session and the follow-on session? Matthew, you're first.
So, as I said previously, we got to diversify the economy. We've been over dependent on oil and gas for too long. It looked to me like we were going to have this 5 to 10 year window to really focus on that. That the current boom, or the recent boom in the Permian Basin, that was expected it was going to last at least that long, and it came to a crashing halt. So the state has been sort of thinking about this in the past. It's critical and urgent now. We've made big investments in things like film and tourism, and unfortunately, both of those are shut down right now. But those will come back. I think it'll be slow, but they will come back. And I think those have been good industries for New Mexico. Healthcare. Not only is healthcare important for the health of our people, but healthcare is an economic industry in New Mexico. Healthcare is good paying jobs. And if we have a good healthcare system, that helps us recruit retirees and supports other businesses. And the third thing I'd say is high tech. We can do more with our high tech businesses. We have spinoffs from the labs. We have resources. We have New Mexico Tech, which is an outstanding school. One thing they're looking for is a well-educated workforce, so that ties back into education, and it's all connected.
All right, that's time, Jim. What needs to be done for the economy in the special session and in the 2021 regular session?
Well, let me say about the special session. The special session is to resolve FY21 budget. The budget we passed in February is not functioning. So the special session is just going to go ahead and make changes to that budget so we get through FY21. What happens in 22? Yeah, maybe we can talk about economic development, but at 22 is also going to be about where's the money going to come from? What do we need to do with the budget? to get through 22. We'll get through to this current fiscal year, which is up through June 30th of this year. FY21 budget needs to be adjusted. That's what we're going to work
If
on.
I can stop, I'm not talking about,
Yeah.
we're not talking about the budget, the economy, and perhaps I misstated that. So perhaps you
Yeah.
could talk about what New Mexico needs to do for our economy.
Good. Okay. Yeah. Economic development. You got to work on your pluses. Our pluses are oil and gas. We need to make sure those things foster. Tourism is another industry that we do well in. We draw in dollars from outside, so we need to promote the tourism industry. Trying to do economic development is tough. So, all right.
All right, Becky. What does our economy need, and what would you do in the legislature to improve our economy?
I think we need to focus on trying to get our small businesses responsibly open back up. I think they can handle that, and that's the gross receipts money is vital to our small towns. I think for going forward to the future, of course, we have a lot of wind and sun, so renewable energies, but we also need to remember that they need to complement oil and gas until we can get our income switched over to different channels. I'm not against recreational marijuana. But I think right now we need to help get our small businesses open and help support them to get back on track to be providing the gross receipts tax to their communities.
All right, and Leota, if you don't have something we need to bump in on, I'd like to go to the budget. Is that all right?
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm fighting with my cell phone currently.
Okay. We don't have enough money to finish fiscal year 20, which ends in 5 weeks, much less the budget passed in the 2020 legislature for fiscal year 21. So my question for each of you, starting with Jim, is what has to be changed in the budget to get us where we need to be?
Yeah, good question. Revenue through, we projected a good revenue stream for this current fiscal year, and it was tracking pretty close through March of the year, when the virus really took hit. So it'll be interesting to see what happens the next forecast for the last quarter of the year. But we'll get through this year because the revenue forecast, or the revenue that we got through March, was pretty good. It was actually above what we forecasted. We're going to have to draw some of our reserves down. Luckily, we put 25% reserves over the past 2 years. We built that up. So we'll draw reserves down maybe to about 20% at the end of this year. And then we need to adjust the 21 budget that we passed, which, like I said, is no longer viable, and make further changes. And we'll probably, between what we have left in reserves, like I say, we'll end this year maybe with 20% reserve. We'll probably take that down to 10 or 15%. And then we're getting about $1.5 billion from the federal government because of the virus problems. Schools are getting $100 million. So that'll fill some of the gaps. And then we need to go back and make some changes to what we passed as far as initiatives that the governor wanted back in January, February. We'll have to make some cuts there. So basically those 3 things.
Oh, thank you.
Reserves, what we're getting the federal government, and then cutting back what we passed. We'll have to make that change.
Got it. Good summary. Becky, how do we fix our budget in the special session, and what will you do if elected in 2021 session for the budget?
So, obviously if I get elected, I would not take office until January, so it would depend on what the current legislators do to fix our budget during the special session. Of course, what the federal government gives us is going to go into play. I don't think that we need to raise taxes on our families that are struggling right now. That's not on the table for me. I do think that I'm not against you know, if we have to tap into the permanent fund, if we have to put it to the voters to see if that's what we need to do to get our state back on track. You know, it all just depends on what happens during the special session.
All right, and Matthew, how do we balance our budget?
I think Jim's right. Jim is correct. It's a two-step process. You know, the first step is the current budget. We're looking at a $2 billion budget hit for the next fiscal year. That's huge. The good news is we have 1.9 billion in reserves. You know, it's something like 27 or 29%. It's a significant amount, and that's really going to help. Any money we can get from the federal government will also help. But even though it's a huge hit, we're relatively well positioned because we put so much in reserve. So that's the good news. They're also, you know, they're already working on the budgets, the budget staff and the committee chairs and probably the Senate Finance, which I think Jim is on, and House Appropriations. You know, and they're trying to come up with a proposal that avoids any furloughs, you know, balances the budget through, you know, trimming increases, hiring freezes, something they call sanding, things like that, you know, like working with the numbers that we have to make our budget work. And the more we can do in this year, the easier it's going to be for next year. So I'm out of time.
Yeah, sorry.
No worries. Leota, I have one more question just based on their comments for each candidate, if that's all right with you.
I have a follow-up on the budget questions, and maybe we could go through them in the same order that they went the first time.
Okay.
I would really like it if you guys would get a little more specific. You know, so hiring freezes, cutting things that have already, cutting increases that have passed, etc. Let's talk about some specifics and not, you know, this super general language. What do you guys think is on the block?
And
do you want me to go
first, because this is a follow-up question. Yes.
Like I say, the big changes are going to be the reserves, taking reserves down. That's going to hurt, you know, our credit rating, but we're going to have to do that. We're getting about $1.2 billion from the feds for various things, a little bit more for schools. You know, we passed 4% pay raises across the board. That is on the table. To go back to 0 raises or maybe 1%, I don't know. That's going to be a negotiation. We'll begin the special session, cutting back on those raises. The 1% raise is about $40 million. So if we cut back, that's 120 million, you know, or 1.2 billion that we can save there. There's quite a bit of money there if we cut back on those raises. The Opportunity Scholarship, although we didn't pass everything or pay all of it that the governor wanted, we did put money into Opportunity Scholarship, some money in some words. That may go away. We may be totally have to eliminate that. The extended school time, I already talked about K-5, K-12, plus extended learning time. Those are costly programs. We may cut back on those things. Matt mentioned sanding. Sanding is a you know, a cut across the board. So we may sand every agency. So that's where some of the money could go to or come from. We also put in a $320 million early childhood care and education program endowment. That was not money spent, but money put away to draw upon later on. So that is a possibility. We may draw that back this year, or we may do that for the 22 school year or the 22 budget year. So those are some of the specifics we're looking at right now. Those are some of the discussions we had, because that was mentioned. We are working on the budget right now, talking about opportunities. I'm not too sure where the governor is going on it. You know, the budget is a legislative budget that the governor signs off on. Certainly there's negotiations that go through the process before we agree and she agrees, but those are where the legislation is looking right now, what we're looking at from our standpoint.
Thank you. That's very specific.
I'm seeing a photo of someone who just joined. Who is that?
Oh, Sisto Abeta works with Becky.
Oh.
Okay. As a PR person, I don't appreciate handlers logging on. I think you could watch live.
Well, it's except
So
that it's
I
not.
would,
We're not streaming live.
okay, but as long as he's muted, it's fine. But
He's muted.
I would never. Okay, as a PR person, I would never join live with a candidate of mine.
He's totally muted.
Fine. And well, then over to Becky. What do you think we need to do to get our budget in balance, given what we're facing in the session starting January 2021?
Well, I disagree with Senator White. I think the teachers' salaries have been so far behind for so long. They need to be as far away from the table as possible. The opportunity scholarship, I think college, it's important, but it's not for everyone. I think, the early pre-K is more important than the opportunity scholarships to me as personally. And definitely, a lot of the departments across the state had been working with understaffed, and they figured out how to do it. And when they had all the money, they were trying to hire and fill all the vacant positions that they have had for so long. But I think that's a definitely don't fill those positions, because all the departments already learned how to manage without them. And then, I don't know, just probably every agency might have to tighten their belts a little bit more, but the teachers need to be kept as far away from the cuts as possible, because they have been behind for so long.
So if teachers need to be kept far away from it, fine, but then where would you cut?
Well, with the opportunity scholarship, other government agencies that haven't had to feel the effects of all their cash balances being swept for, like the schools have for so long. We can't balance our state budget on the backs of our future and the education.
Okay.
Matthew, what are you going to cut?
So I appreciate Jim's insight. Him being on Senate Finance, I mean, he's got a front row seat to what's going on. He's right. We're going to rely heavily on the reserves. There's something like 27% right now. Under Martinez, they were as low as 3%, and our bond rating did get downgraded. So I'm not saying we're going to go to 3%. We need to avoid that, because the bond rating is important. But we'll certainly tap into those reserves. I do think the raises will be pulled back, the state employee raises. Hopefully they won't go away. I know there's already discussion in my caucus about protecting the teacher raises. I don't know to what extent we're going to be able to do that, but we're certainly discussing it already. And there will be a lot of discussion about the budget before we go into session. Capital outlay, unexpended capital outlay funds, those are going to be on the table. Jim's right, the early childhood education endowment. So the idea of an endowment is you draw from the interest, but the 300 million, if you're drawing from the interest, really isn't that much. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. That's money we've effectively saved, and we could switch over to the land grant permanent fund to fund early childhood education. So that's an option.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate those specifics from you guys. Merritt, you got another one on deck?
I do. I have a question for each candidate based on your comments today and your backgrounds. And I think we're back to Becky going first. And Becky, I just want to say, I've lived in New Mexico, just because I'm older than you, longer than you. I moved here when I was 1. And I also am kind of from a small town political family. And your grandfather appointed my mother to the Board of Regents of Western New Mexico University. And she was a strong Republican, and clearly he's a strong Democrat. So what I'm really interested in is in this mixed rural-urban district where you've got some really educated elites in Santa Fe, and you're also dealing with Stanley and Moriarty. How do you work across the rural and urban gap, and also the blue and red gap?
Well, I think it just comes down to listening to all of your constituents and their concerns, and figuring, having empathy of where each of them is coming from. I think working together across the lines is crucial to getting anything done. You have to be able to work with people, have an open door and just listen. And I don't think New Mexicans are as far apart. Everybody wants a clean environment. Everybody wants clean water, clean air to breathe. I think there's just different, environmentalists are always after ranchers. Cows were, the main reason for climate change. I think, but ranchers make their living off the environment, so they want clean environment, clean air, clean water also. And I think just listening and being open and having an open door and being able to see where people are coming from is what would be helpful as a state representative.
Okay, and Matthew, I have a different question for you because, yes, you did. Yes, you did. If Leota has a follow-up, she will ask you. I want to move on to Matthew because you pointed out something that's really near and dear to my heart is technology and the technology industry in New Mexico. And we have a phenomenal opportunity with the spaceport. But we've also talked about education through this whole time. And how do you think in the legislature you can help PED bridge the gap so that our high school graduates and college graduates are ready for spaceport jobs?
So our education, I want our education system, our public education, K through 12, especially high school, to be essentially more practical. I had a bill to teach what I call life skills in high school, which include media literacy, financial literacy, and workforce preparedness. Because we want, not all of our kids are going to go to college. That's fine. We want them to be ready to enter the workforce. We're doing a good job with matching up industry with local schools, especially community colleges. Facebook, for example, in Berlin, they need electricians. So they're working with local schools to develop those projects. In the Moriarty Edgewood School District, they've got some great vocational programs that we've been able to help along, like auto shop. And if that's what you want to do, let's get those kids trained in high school. Let's let them pursue something that's interesting so they're ready to go. And spaceport, spaceport is down in the southern part of the state. There's a natural tie-in with New Mexico Tech. And they're doing a lot. The tourist rides haven't started yet, but that doesn't mean they're not using the spaceport. So I agree, there is a lot of potential down there.
Okay, and then my last specific question for you, Jim. You've really stood up and been an advocate for tax reform. Yet in your primary, you're kind of being attacked on that. And I'd just like to give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We did a tax bill that I was criticized for. It had a lot of moving parts to it. And it was more about tax reform than tax increase. There were some increases there. There were also some reductions there. But some interesting things were in there. For instance, hospital tax. Nonprofit hospitals were not taxed. They came to us in the legislature and said, hey, you know what? For every dollar the state puts into Medicaid, we get $3 from the federal government. So why don't you go ahead and tax us and then turn around and put that tax money into Medicaid from the state and then we'll get $3 from the federal government. So that's what happened. We taxed the nonprofit hospitals at their request, turned around, put that money into Medicaid, and they got $3. So it was a win-win for the hospitals. It was win-win for New Mexico. So that was a good deal. We did raise taxes on vehicle sales. I think it went up 0.5%. Made us competitive with other states that also do the same thing. There was a tax reduction for working families in there. So there was some increases, there's some reductions in there. The bill was more about tax reform than it was tax increases. But of course, you know, every bill up in Santa Fe, you can find something in it you don't like and criticize. And so,
and of course, you've
yeah,
tried to eliminate taxes on military pensions and on Social Securities. Isn't that correct?
well, thank you for that. I also asked for a tax rebate last year. In that, when at the time we had a lot of money, it was actually falling out of our pockets, is what I tell folks. And why not do a tax rebate like we did back in the Richardson administration? Give everybody back, a couple $100. And I also did the Social Security tax elimination, but both of those, the Social Security thing never got heard. There were a lot of people that did that. The tax rebate was killed in committee.
Well, that's it for me for questions. Leota, if you have any other questions, I say go for it. Otherwise, I say we do closing statements.
All right, I've got a question that I really hope that we can look at without it devolving into partisan politics. So I'm going to really ask you guys to do that. So we're in the middle of this.
This is a friendly crowd for it, I think.
It super is. It really is. We're in the middle of this pandemic. We've got, people who think that it's nothing at all. We've got people who are panicked and don't want to leave their house, and we've got everything in between. We need to figure out how, in the long term, how do we reintegrate? How do we get things going again? What's going to happen to the small businesses? It's a really crazy situation. So in 1 minute, maybe we could extend it to 2 if you think you need it. How do we go forward in the coming months? How do we address this thing?
I think Matthew goes first, correct? Yes.
All right.
So the pandemic, it's like nothing we have ever experienced. There was a Spanish flu in 1918. None of us were around. Okay, it's a huge impact. It impacts every aspect of our lives. It impacts every aspect of our state. I had my son was in kindergarten. His kindergarten year got cut short. I don't know when he's going to go back. I don't know when that's going to be safe. So what can we do? We absolutely have to continue the social distancing. I think masks are just standard now. And, Leota, you don't want to be political. The fact that some people are politicizing wearing masks is really, I think, just asinine. People need to wear masks. I mean, it's to protect each other. It's not just to protect yourself. It's not an infringement on liberty. It's something we need to do. If we want to go back to schools, if we want to go back to business, we need to practice these social distancing techniques, including wearing masks, not touching stuff, try not to touch your face, and I do it all the time. It's impossible. Wash your hands, all those things. It's going to be slow and it's going to be arduous. It's not going to happen overnight like some people are suggesting.
It's definitely, it definitely feels slow and arduous. Merritt, who's up next?
Jim is next. COVID-19, what do we do in New Mexico?
Yeah, that's it. Like Matt said, it's a tough.
Also solve world hunger when I'm done.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm not sure how you solve it. I think businesses, there's different parts of the state that need to be treated differently. The federal government has not come down and said, okay, every state is going to do all these things. every business is going to close down until, I think we need to do the same thing in the state. There's some parts of the state that have no problems at all. I think they can be opened up. I think businesses and the people in New Mexico are smart enough to take the precautions that they feel necessary. Some of the businesses have been forced to do things that they don't want to do, yet they have no cases. I talked to the mayors in the 3 small communities they've got, to Harris, Edgewood, Moriarty. Moriarty says that the mayor there runs one of the businesses, and he's had 44,000 people through his business in the past month with no cases, no indications that. Now, some of the folks come in there with masks, some don't, but he does not feel obligated to force everybody to do a mask because he has no problems in his community. It's just that painting everybody in the state with the same broad brush and then selectively allowing some big businesses to operate, like the Walmarts and the Kmarts, while closing small businesses is detrimental, and it doesn't help the economy. We're suffering because of that, and maybe the solution is worse than the ills itself. So I think we need to open up some more and treat different businesses and different communities differently. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Becky, how should New Mexico and your district be responding to COVID-19?
I think our district and our area has done a good job. We've all learned how to social distance. There's not that many cases. It's not, spreading as fast as it is up in the northwest of our state. I think it's kind of a personal decision. If you feel comfortable sending your child back to school or not, we need to, really look at investing in rural infrastructure so that the people that can't or don't feel healthy enough or not comfortable can be able to participate in school and, and things like this. I can't even have my picture up on the screen. But I think the small businesses, they're not that packed anyways, and we have the new, guidelines, and people have learned how to not hug and touch and stand close to each other. And I think we need to just kind of get our economy going again and let them open up. And I think New Mexicans are responsible. We're not, just recklessly trying to hurt other people in our community.
All right, thank you very much, all you guys. Why don't we go ahead and move on to your closing statements? I think we're just over an hour. I think that's a pretty good length for this video to be.
Yeah, and I think Jim is first.
Okay, yeah. Thank you again for having this forum. It's always good to have our ideas challenged and to talk about what we believe in and where we want to go and what we've done. It's regrettable, it's sad. Mother's Day, got together with my daughter and my granddaughter. Yeah, you wanted to give them a hug, but you couldn't do that. You didn't want to do that. You didn't know whether you had a problem or they had a problem with the disease. Not being able to shake hands with my cohorts, it's tough. You can't shake hands. You can't give somebody a hug. You can't even pray together right now. These are tough times, but I'm confident we'll get through this. We got through the, World War I, the Great Depression. 8 million people died during the Great Depression from poverty and famine and problems like that. We got through that. We got through World War II. We had tough times socially during the Vietnam years. We got through that. We'll get through this. We just need to work together and make it happen, and be, not give up on the battle. Not give up on the battle. Keep on trying to do the best we can. And everybody, just respect the values we have. I go through that, the basics of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, and for that matter, the 10 Commandments. Believe in those things and live by those principles, and we'll get through this and work together. So, in closing, I want to continue my time up in Santa Fe. I've got the experience. I've got the time to dedicate to the job, and it's something I really want to do. So And I appreciate your support, appreciate your vote when it comes to the election here in just 10 days away. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Becky, what do you have to say to us in your closing statement?
Thank you both for putting this on. I just want to tell everyone that I'm a lifelong New Mexican and resident of the area, and I have a heart and soul for our state and our community and our youth. And I've spent a lot of my adult life volunteering and helping kids in our community, and I just really want to keep that the main focus of my run. And I look forward to serving you in Santa Fe. Thank you for your vote.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, Matthew, bring us home. Yeah, bring us home, Matthew.
To me, being in the legislature is public service. It's not a glamorous job. We're a state legislature. We're a small state population-wise. It's a lot of work. It's unpaid. I think most people know. And we're in these unprecedented times. So I think we're in for a tough stretch. But there's work to be done. And I think I have the experience and the skill to get back and help. I think I'm pretty good at this. My background being a lawyer, I think is helpful. And 6 years in the legislature, I've learned a lot. It's a steep learning curve. And if you're not learning when you're in the legislature, then you're not paying attention. So it's an ongoing process. Also, I have a small business. I have a family. I have young kids. My son, as I said, was in kindergarten. He'll be going back to public school pretty soon. My daughter's 3, so she turns 4 in a couple months. She'll be there soon enough. So I'm really focused on their future. I'm focused on the state's future. And I think I'm in a position to help. And I'd like to continue to do that. So I would appreciate everyone's support.
All right. Well, thank all of you very much for taking time out of your busy lockdowns to do this. I know all of you have got a lot going on, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do it. And I'm really sorry we couldn't make our live stream work. I'm going to keep working on that, and maybe our next forum will be able to do that. But
That's why rural broadband needs to be a legislative priority. Just saying.
I agree.
Right.
Not kidding.
All right.
No,
so
and I want to. I was going to say, I want to thank y'all. You are raising thousands of dollars from people you don't know for an unpaid volunteer job that's really hard and puts you in so much public scrutiny. And I have so much respect for what you do and your work. And I thank you so much for running.
I agree. That's a tough job, and I'm glad you guys are doing it. Keeps me in Cheerios. So it's a. All right, before we start getting silly, let's go ahead and sign off. Thank you, everyone. I will be posting this video on Facebook as soon as I get that to work. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye.